Hi. I'm so glad to be back, and of course you can hear that Dr. Moore is here with us and ready to go, and I'm back too, and I've really missed you all, and it is so great to be back on the Melanology. And as usual, we have a lot of additional information to share with you to increase your level of endarkenment. Put parentheses around that word, endarkenment, because that is one of Dr. Moore's icons that he has coined for us. So we might as well start out on you just defining that term relative to the real phenomena of what really happens with light, especially in the pineal gland. So tell us more about endarkenment and the pineal gland today.
Okay, sure. I guess when we just think about the reality of gaining knowledge and information, most people think that they become enlightened because they've seen the light and they've now got new information. But in actuality, most of the time when people are meditating, they're not meditating in light, but meditating in darkness. So darkness becomes very important and key and critical in terms of obtaining a higher form of consciousness. So when I use the word endarken us, it really is to shed light on this magnificent opportunity to look at the internal dynamics of our body and how our body functions to be in tune with the environment. And nighttime is a very important time. During nighttime, the pineal gland is a very centralized organ in the brain, produces a chemical called melatonin. We talked about it before.
Can I just inject one thing here before you go into melatonin that I thought was really important, because I was just looking at the explanation on light in regards to pigment versus the actual wavelength. And one of the things that they made very clear is that there's always light. However, when the light is actually turned in on itself, that it is not reflecting itself outward from its source, because we can't see a particular wavelength projected onto the retina of the eye. It appears to be dark, but literally there's really no such thing as darkness. What we're seeing is light that has actually folded in on itself. So I use the analogy, and again, here I am as the nighttime scientist, as a rosebud. And so when the rose bush is in its budding stage, complete buds, we don't know what color rose we're going to get. All we see right now is that it's, we got these green things over this protrusion, and it's like, okay, well, when I bought the rose bush and I planted it, it said that I was going to get, livid red roses. Okay, that's the name of the rose bush, livid red. But I can't prove that right now because everything, the petals, etc., are all enfolded on themselves. And so, therefore, I don't see any red petals. But over time, obviously, the rose unfolds its petals to us, and it reflects very intensely the frequency of the red wavelength. And so that's what I see to confirm that this is actually red. But it was always red, but I couldn't see it because the petals that contain this pigment that would reflect the red wavelength back to me was folded in on itself. And so when we don't see light, it's not because it's not any light there, it's because the light is basically not really being reflected upon our nervous system from an exterior sense. Now, I kind of hesitated when I said that, Doc, because when I say an exterior sense, when the neurons are firing, that's when we appear to see light, when the impulses are moving. But that's one of the things that happens in meditation, is that it appears to be dark, there's nothing going on, because the excitation level, there's no movement of the energy, is very, very low, and so therefore there's no stimulation or carrying of a frequency of energy, so we appear in our mind not to see anything. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so that's really the same thing that's happening. When you use the term endarkening in your work, what I saw in my mind was like, okay, that's really really interesting, because instead of the light being now reflected out in myself, I'm actually taking the light and folding it in on myself to really allow deep regeneration and deep energizing of my tissue, so there's really nothing that's being reflected out or activity that's releasing energy, because all the energy now is being held. So it's like this phenomena that they have. They call it recursion, where you can reach a particular harmony where the light, as it actually is reflected out, also bends on itself and returns to the source at the same rate. And this harmony that occurs now actually amplifies and increases the amount of energy that is being absorbed and also released. So they find that the circle or the arc-like geometry is what causes this recursive phenomena, and they allege that because of the angulation of how the pyramids are built, that the way the light hits those angles, it causes the light to bend on itself at a certain rate, the frequency, where it actually continuously sustains whatever object is in the pathway of those recursive frequencies of light. So therefore, nothing in those pathways are destroyed. Even when they put those vessels inside with the grain and cloth and the jewelry and whatever else it might have been found in many of these pyramids, the way that the light frequency bent on itself because of the geometry that was used to capture the light, it was self-sustaining. Okay, so I just thought that was just really interesting that, again, the pyramids are always filled with light, but when you go in them, you don't see it because the light is turning in on itself, but it's still very much there, and that's what it appears to happen to us at night, is that the light actually is held in the tissues as opposed to being emanated out to do work.
Well, you shared a lot of information there. Background information to help the audience understand where you're coming from. And then the other issue I'll try to recall is the way you're talking about refraction or reflectiveness.
Recursion.
Okay, recursion. Okay, I hadn't heard that term used, but I can try to look at how it also touches the pineal gland. Visible light, as you just said, is what we see. So it's talked about in your books, and we know that there's a large electromagnetic spectrum that exists out there, from gamma rays, X-rays, all the way down to just UV bands and down to microwaves, but the ones that we see in terms of light is visible light. I measure like 350 to about 750 nanometers. So
right, teeny weeny small aspect of light relative to what's available to be seen.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you said, even when we're asleep, we still have some light coming in, and now this light is being turned on itself to what have some manifestation on the physiological processes. And that's where the pineal gland comes into play as an organ. Now, what's interesting is that the eyes that we have, there are two eyeballs. In the back part, in the retina, those same cells in the retina are similar to the shape of the cells in the pineal gland. So the pineal gland becomes a phototransducer. It transduces the light energy into something that the body can recognize. And this is key because, as you talked about in the pyramids and how the light shines in certain places, it goes through certain corridors, it's being absorbed as it's going through, and I use the word reflecting. It's being reflected and refracted. The same thing's happening as it goes from the eyeball then to the pineal gland, because it doesn't go straight from the eyeball to the pineal gland. It goes to the hypothalamus first. It also goes to the top part of your spinal cord before it gets to the pineal gland, which means there's a whole lot of other chambers, as you just talked about with the pyramid complex. And we know the power of the pyramids, which means we can have a powerful pyramidal structure within our anatomy that we don't really pay attention to.
Now, see, this is interesting that you would say that, because those individuals who are members of my Immortal Chat Club and High World out there, again, you should join the Immortal Chat Club, because this is all the foundational information to really help you understand and begin to activate your immortal genes, because you do have them.